Hello and welcome to Asian Insider. I'm your host, Bhagyashree Garekar, and we are recording this episode on Wednesday, the 11th of February, 2026. Now we're approaching Chinese New Year, and I thought, why not take a break from geopolitics and talk about happier things? So with me today are two special guests, two Singaporeans, startup founders who have built successful businesses in America. We're going to ask them how they did it. Speaking to us from Silicon Valley is Jasmin Young. She's something of a serial entrepreneur. She sold off one startup recently for millions, I believe, and she's currently nurturing another one. Welcome, Jasmin.
Thank you for having me here today, Bhagya.
And we have Anthony Chow, who's speaking to us from Singapore. He's the CEO and co-founder of Igloo. We'll find out soon what Igloo is, but I should mention that he recently received the International Startup of the Year award from authorities in Austin, Texas. Welcome, Anthony.
Thank you, Bhagya, for having me.
My first question to you, Jasmin. Could you talk a bit about your startup? It has a very specific market, and I'm curious as a cat, to learn more.
Well, thank you, Bhagya. It's been fun to be building lots of different things over the many, many years. And recently, everyone's been focused on AI. So my latest startup is focused on AI. And quite specifically, the cat is out of the bag with the product that we have. We launched it a couple of weeks ago. It's called Meow Mobile. And it is focused on cat-owning parents. And it's a telco that enables them to not just have unlimited talk, text, and data, but also a vet care plan to take care of their fur babies. So it's a very niche offering by design because we really wanted to target the long tail possibilities of marketing. When you think of how AI can identify and serve and support different niches out there. So very affinity driven type possibilities.
That is cool. Now, I'm going to ask you, Anthony, what is Igloo? Now, of course, it has nothing to do with snow and ice, but why do you call that? And what is it?
Thanks, Bhagya, for having me on this podcast. So we started Igloo about 10 years ago with a very simple vision, and that vision is to create a world without keys. We want to help anyone, consumers, businesses, to really move away from the physical key into the digital key era. And so when we were thinking of a name for Igloo, there is really an official and unofficial meaning behind Igloo, and I'll go ahead with the official one. And that really is because we are in the business of trust. We're securing homes and securing spaces, and really the Igloo shelters its inhabitant, really the Eskimos, from the harshness of winter, and portrays a sense of warmth and security behind it, and that's what the brand is about. For the unofficial reason, you might need to get me a cup of coffee and I'll share with you.
Sure. Soon as you're in Texas. Are you flying here soon, aren't you?
Yes, I am. In fact, I'm back in Singapore for the Chinese New Year. So as a business, we have a dual headquarters set up across Singapore as well as Austin, Texas. Today as a business, when we first started, we were very focused on serving the vacation rental market. Our very first customer segments were the Airbnb hosts all around the world, and really covering many of the vacation rental platforms, as a solution provider for access control for many of them around the world. And over the last 4 years, we have expanded aggressively into the United States, where we set up our office in Austin, Texas in end of 2021, continuing serving the vacation rental market, but we expanded more into the general home housing rental market, into the single family and the multifamily rental market. And today, about 70% of the business is actually based in the US, and we have a fast and growing team over in the US.
I see. And when you say it's about access control, you mean a lock. And so is it a physical lock?
Right. Today, the business has both hardware and software to it. So imagine if you're an Airbnb host, when we first started, if you want to let someone go into your property, you typically will need to meet them up, pass them a physical key to let them come in to visit the property. And when they leave, you need to allow like a housekeeping service to come in. There's a lot of physical key exchanges that needs to be happen. So what we did was we designed our very first smart lock. This was almost like 8-9 years ago. We install it on your door, and then we create an ecosystem of software integration partners. Like for example, Airbnb as an integration partner or housekeeping service as one, and then we can automate the entire check-in process for you as an Airbnb host. So we can automate the entire property management cycle from checking in all the way to checkout, and during the turnover as well. So when we first started, we were just doing this for like single Airbnb hosts, people with like 1 or 2 homes, 2 or 3 homes, and we were actually very excited that we managed to get a global partnership with Airbnb back in 2016, which really helped to accelerate the growth of the business. Going from just serving the small Airbnb hosts to really serving some of the super hosts with 500 properties to 5,000 properties even. And today, some of our largest vacation rental properties, homeowners have like hundreds of thousands of properties, kind of covering around the world. And so today, as a business, we recently just launched our Igloo OS platform, which is our enterprise access control platform, that has a full stack layer from hardware to software, which covers kind of user management, tenancy management, kind of the entire access control lifecycle management, all the way to a very connected integration platform, which is called Igloo Connect. Today, we serve about 500 over integration partners globally. When we first started with Airbnb, today we have companies like Zillow, companies like Oyo Rooms, companies like CapitaLand, and many other large platforms on that platform itself, serving about 5,000 enterprises globally. And last year, we processed more than 1 billion unlocks on the platform, and
Wow.
growing fast.
Okay, that's interesting. 1 billion unlocks. Jasmin, let me turn to you. From Meow Mobile, what's been the response from the people you're targeting it at?
There's been a lot of excitement because it really addresses their emotional needs to care for their cats, for example, in a very specific way. But, I think the main thing here is the theme around being able to address specific customer needs. That's always been something that I believe as a market, when you think of very broad marketing, generally speaking, it has always been very two-dimensional. They go after males, females, a certain kind of income bracket, a certain kind of profile. But what we're trying to drive with in the age of AI is a sort of intersectionality of different sort of personality persona types. So the person who is a homeowner, for example, in Anthony's case, who also owns a cat, who is goes to a particular kind of school, who is a particular gender, particular background from a ethnicity perspective. There may be some cultural context, certain age group. That person is whom we could potentially target. That something could potentially appeal to him. So beyond the Meow Mobile concept, there's the whole concept of affinity groups that we can now reach out to in a more intimate way, in a more relevant way.
Could somebody in Singapore use it? Your Meow Mobile? I mean, could I download it? For
At the
instance,
moment,
is
no.
it an app that I could? Oh, okay.
It's a whole phone service. So at the
Right.
moment, no. But think beyond Meow Mobile. It really is about how we connect people to different products and services in a very scalable way, but infinitely intimate in a form where you think of the long tail of the market, right? It's not just the large two-dimensional segments that one would target, but rather very specific type of individual needs. So that's where someone could use technology like ours to really reach out to very specific personalities, very specific type of personas that have specific needs. And that type of scalability used to be something that would have taken a lot of resources to amass, to reach, to target, right, to market, as well as to serve. You would need immense call centers for people to understand, different market segments. But now we can do that very easily through AI. And that's the power of technology that I think that the Valley brings in terms of not just in a very general sort of way, a search engine, an LLM, your chat GPT can research all sorts of things, but to be able to leverage agentic AI to run a lot of different processes behind the scenes, to think for you, to help you process the priorities, to run it cost efficiently, and to also cater to individual personalities differently. So we can speak the kind of language that they would identify with, right? As, say, a cat parent, for example.
Can I also draw you back to your earlier startup? So that I guess didn't have that cuddly cat kind of thing. Tell us about it. I mean, you were part of a team starting it. You grew it so successfully, and you exited, I think, with pretty good returns.
Well, thank you, Bhagya. The company was actually called Netreo, and it was a company in network performance monitoring as well as application performance monitoring. So that's the enterprise software space, which is very esoteric to many people, but so vital to enterprises who have mission critical needs. For example, the McDonald's of the world with 14,000 restaurants in the United States alone, or entities that have a high security needs, like, say, for example, the FBI, or banks like Citizens Banks. Those were our customers. And so if you think of the scale of what we were actually looking at, it's not something that an individual human being can monitor when you have so many devices in so many branches and so many locations that you need to securely manage and monitor to ensure that there's always the uptime. So with that sort of mission critical technology, we needed to have the technology to really kind of understand the market, to serve the market we were going after, and to identify the right customer profile. So the core part about that is understanding our customers, whether it's an enterprise market or whether it's a consumer market. We have to be able to get that product market fit. We have to be able to identify the customers we're going after, being very passionate about it, building a team around that, and then being able to serve and support, right, that particular value proposition. In the enterprise space as well, it involved building partners to be able to sell your product. So it wasn't about us knocking on doors precisely or just selling on the internet. It was really about that trusted influencers in the enterprise space through the reseller, value-added reseller kind of channel, system implementers who will be able to take the product out there to implement it. So it's a very sort of complex sale that really needed to be nurtured, right? Not just from an ideation perspective, but all the way through to the fulfillment of it. And what was innovative about what we did was that we really were very crisp about our ideal customer profile and worked with partners that were able to scale our message.
This place, the US, has thousands, I believe 80,000 startups. And, these are ventures which are looking to, like you say, scale. So small ventures in this huge universe. So my question actually to both of you is, how do you stand out? Anthony, could you go first?
Actually, Jasmin did a great job talking about, how she stood out in her startups. And I really want to echo the fact that she mentioned is the fact that we really need to focus on the customer profile as well as the customer problems, right? So one example from our end is that when we first started, we were serving the vacation rental market, the Airbnb market. And this was 2016, around the time. And there were a couple of smart lock companies in the market, right? But we realized that many of these smart lock companies, they all require internet and Wi-Fi to operate so that you can remotely manage and change the access codes for every single guest. But the challenge with many of the vacation rental properties is that they might be in the mountains, in the beach, or like in a cabin in the wood. Many of them don't come with good Wi-Fi connectivity, right? In fact, in our very first pilot where we shipped out 500 of our products to Airbnb hosts in Australia, half of them came back and they couldn't connect properly. And most of the time it's really the internet problem. So we had to innovate on a solution that is different from what everyone else is working on, which is a non-connected smart lock. It's kind of like an oxymoron. But it focuses very closely on this set of customers that we needed to serve. So we designed our own technology called the Igloo pin technology, where we're able to remotely grant access to the smart lock without the lock needing any connectivity at all.
How is that even possible? How does?
Yeah, it's,
I mean,
I'm
why?
not allowed to say it on air, but it's basically like a banking token technology. like the banking token systems that you have, or like Google
Yes.
Authenticate systems that you use.
Oh, yes.
Where we basically are able to create a one-time code, just like a one OTP kind of system, where we add technology into the lock, and then we extend the technology to allow these pins to be enabling information to tell the lock that this pin is valid for 1 day, 2 days, or like the length of the duration of the Airbnb reservation, right? What we did was then we patented the whole system behind it, calling Algo pin, and right now we have extended it to multiple different kind of credentials solution. And this, kind of focus on customer allowed us to create a solution that is uniquely different from many of our competitors in the market, which are all going the connected smartphone route, right? And this allowed us to continue to build on that into the segments that we are working on right now, the basically the general housing rental market, like the single family rental and the multifamily rental market here in the US, where if you think about a Class B, Class C multifamily in the US, many of them are built in the 1980s, 1970s, where there's no Wi-Fi connection in many other common area solutions. So property manager managing thousands of multifamily in the US, where they look at solutions in the market today, all of them require connectivity, trunking of cables, power and all that, where we provide an offering that is completely retrofit, no Wi-Fi required, providing a very economical, cost-effective solution that has lower capex and lower opex, and it creates a very nice niche, that allows us to win in this, like you said, increasingly crowded space in the US. So like today we have probably over 35 patents pending and granted on this technology. And with a very strong ecosystem integration, which is necessary for many of these operators to use as part of their workflows. And today we have more than 500 integrations on the platform today to provide a full stack access control solution. And I guess one thing that I'll say is that, it's important to be bold and ambitious once you have a solution like this. When we first started, we put a vision statement to create a world without keys, right? And then we created technologies behind it. And 2 years ago, to showcase our ambition as well as the technology that we have created, we sent our smart locks into space. Right? And then we, about 30 miles above the Earth's surface, we have the video floating in space, and then we unlocked it from Earth. So if it works in space, it works anywhere, where there's no connectivity in space, in an extreme harsh environment with like negative 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And then, after it unlocked, it dropped back down to Earth. And I think that is the highest drop test anyone has done
for the lock as well. Okay. I'm sure you got a lot of attention out of that.
Yeah, that was a good one. To showcase reliability, engineering, excellence, as well as kind of ambition. More importantly, the symbolism behind our vision to create a world without keys. Yeah.
And so, Jasmin, did you do any, going to space and dropping something? Or I don't know,
not quite. It's definitely impressive, Anthony. So exciting to hear that, and so proud of you to have done that. I think what's similar though is the domain expertise. When you listen to Anthony's talk about his whole lock industry experience, you know that he's done this before. You know that he's innovating and growing on something, and that really comes across, in terms of the expertise, the passion for a certain area. We bring that commonality in a sense for the different companies that I've been a part of. Whether in my history it was a company for women with breast cancer, we started because my mom had breast cancer, we made lingerie, or software that helped in supply chains because I was interested in that, or even today, right now it's in AI because my former company was in AI ops. So I'm interested in autonomous enterprises, autonomous stuff. So that's something you can't fake. And that's something that differentiates as well in terms of what some of the other ideas are and bringing it into innovation, because innovation is about exercising and getting it done. It's not just the idea, it's actually working it and making it happen, right? So the insights that come from all the experience make that innovation very differentiated. So in my case, it was understanding what AI is, because we dealt with all these millions and millions of devices from autonomous, on systems, right? Working with these large companies to now then figure out how do we drive the right insights for customers to connect with them. Also, we're blessed on our team. The founder of this particular enterprise is actually Abhishek Gupta in the telco space. You might have heard of him from Circles.life. And that's a major telco player in Singapore. And then bringing the AI element, with other people who have a lot of technology experience in Silicon Valley to really take this, to move this idea from insight or inspiration into actual innovation. So you got to kind of fall in love with the problem, as Anthony said, and then come up with the technology that meets it. Because whether it's AI, BI, CI, whatever, that's always going to change, right? Whether it's on Earth, out of Earth, off this Earth, the whole thing is, how does it solve our problem today? And then the discipline of choosing the problems. Because when you look around you, there's so many things you want to solve. And the question is, how do you then craft, right, the problem you want to solve with the solution that most meets that need with the experience that we have, and then staying like relentlessly focused on the niche that you want to go after.
There will be people who are listening to us speak and who are probably hoping that you can give us a little bit more of a personal, insight into what it is that, that you relied on, some habit, some trait, something that, you hit a wall and you had a breakthrough. Maybe I'll ask Anthony first. Is there something that comes to mind?
I think, was it Jack Ma who said that today is difficult, tomorrow is even more difficult, but the day after tomorrow is beautiful. But most people don't make it to the day after tomorrow because there's just so many challenges that you got to go through. So the entire journey is a marathon. It's not a sprint. You have to be able to last. You have to have the endurance. And the way to do it is that, some of the challenging moments that as a company we have gone through, we've seen the teammates who are able to work together, come together, and go through this cauldron of fire and come out stronger on the other side. And I lean on a lot of them to be able to push through, right? Because if I see them pushing through, I need to be pushing extra hard, right? And they give me the motivation and the energy, because if they don't, if I should be working like doubling hard with them, right? And I think I like to say this funny thing, right, is that like because we have dual headquarters across Asia and the US, where the US is the biggest part of our market. The first person I talk to when I wake up and the last person I talk to when I sleep is actually my head of the US. So I mean, I think it's just creating that very, very tight connectivity across the different regions is so important, that to be able to build a business that continues to last. And I think that on the other side, on the people side, is also I try to bring in mentors as well as teammates that are more experienced, as well as having a lot more foresight than me, right? One of the interesting things that I might share is that when we first started about 2 years in, we had this partner that joined us, and he said that Anthony, what I'm going to do for you is we're going to build an Apple-like store in Indonesia to sell Igloo products, so that we show that we are like a huge company globally and that we'll get a lot of enterprise customers. And we were like, oh, we just sold like maybe a few thousand locks, we're just starting out. And who are we to say that we are like Apple of smart locks? But because this person believed in us so much more than we believe in ourselves, it really gives us confidence.
There is actually an Apple-like store for Igloo locks in Indonesia.
Yes.
There is. Okay.
In the west side of Jakarta. Yeah, I mean, like probably an hour away from the airport. Yeah, we can send you the address.
Interesting. So interesting.
Three stories. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, Jasmin. Anything comes to mind in terms of a breakthrough you reached, something internally that I guess made you grow as a founder as a result of some challenge that you faced?
That's a great question, because when we think about it, people always think of things as being very smooth. When you look at the entire journey, you celebrate the success. You don't really talk about the failures or the tough moments in between. I think sometimes these things are internal, like challenges, and some things happen because of the circumstances. So my biggest breakthrough actually came from COVID. So my CEO experience began a month before COVID started, essentially. So that was very exciting because I had this whole playbook, having had, almost a decade of management consulting experience of how to run companies, turn around companies, grow companies, previous startup experience. So I thought, I got this, and hubris or otherwise, suddenly COVID came about. And the best part is, I think that I learned from this is never waste a crisis. I think we really heard that through as well from COVID. And at that time, everything was changing. Suddenly we had to go home. And that was such a big shift that it was unprecedented. Now, there are two ways to do this. If there's an unprecedented shift, you can buckle under and say, we're done, lay off the company, like, okay, fold up and go, or take this as a Rubicon. And that's really, you don't fail by, falling down. You fail by going forward. We fail forward. We move forward by establishing the next thing. So that for me was the COVID moment. What happened? We were able to not just have people work in the office in Southern California, which is where the company was based. I had always thought that we wanted, when I did this as a PE turnaround, I wanted to be able to bring in people from Silicon Valley and around the world, the best minds and thinkers for this particular technology space to build, right, and scale the company. And it was hard because at first they were all fossilized in a certain way of working. But with COVID, I had a brilliant excuse for now working remotely, for hiring talent everywhere else so that we could actually grow. With COVID, I had the opportunity to acquire companies that were not doing that great. With COVID, I had the opportunity to be literally an Asian woman technology leader running a very SoCal company that had quite a very different kind of profile, shall we say, that SoCal kind of look to a more value-oriented style. So the thing is, I know, Anthony, you talked about the Apple thing, but one of the famous Apple ads was think different, right? And different is not a bad thing. I think sometimes in Singapore, we worry that we need to conform with the standard that different means we're not going to be great. Well, I'd like to introduce the notion that different could be differentiating. Different could be distinctive. A different voice in a room, such as a female technology leader, really stands out in a video conference call because I would just sound different. They remember what I say for good or for bad. So we have to be careful about what we say and do, but it is a possibility to actually make a difference. So moments like this, in terms of what would seem to be a moment where you might fail, could be a moment where there's breakthrough, not just for you, but for those around, to break stereotypes, to be the unknown, because nobody knows Singaporeans, right? So we are so few of us. Suddenly we're the unknown factor that comes out of the blue that surprises them.
So if I can press this point further, do you feel like, as a Singaporean, apart from being the queen of South California, do you think that that being Singaporean actually worked to your advantage, or did it not?
Actually, I do think it is an advantage to be Singaporean, and maybe because I come from this particular lens. I'll just kind of put in a few words. Firstly, we have grit. We have this whole kiasu culture, which I thought in Singapore seems bad, but actually it's grit. We just never say die. We're a tiny island. We were told we couldn't survive. That underdog spirit DNA runs deep. We are resourceful, we're persistent, and yet we have an amazing community of support around us. Singapore is such a small island, but if Anthony and I actually knew each other through someone. It was like a one degree of separation. It wasn't even 6, so you have that sort of force behind you in Singapore where you know someone who can help you. And that sort of grit and that notion that you have a very, very powerful community is amazing. Secondly, we have cultural fluency. You grew up multilingual, multicultural. In Silicon Valley, that's where your team is. That's what your team is, right? Your customers, your investors, they're from everywhere. That is our superpower. We're smart, we're articulate, we communicate well, we're confident, we're global because we have no choice. We're tiny as an island. We are conditioned to think globally from day one. Anthony wasn't thinking, I'm going to sell to all the HDB flats. He was like, I got to sell to the world. I got to go out of this world to get this done, right? And then the network and the research, those are things that I think make us strong because we're careful, we're intentional, and we just, essentially realize that we want to bring a lot of this upbringing to our corporate context.
And what about you, Anthony? I mean, did being Singaporean, did that have a special impact in the mix?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Jasmine articulated it perfectly, right? I think the whole underdog spirit, the whole going global from day one kind of idea, I think was really, kind of built in from day one, right? The way we thought about our business. But also because we're in the business of access control, you really need the currency of trust, and Singapore has a great reputation. Any contract that we sign, they know that we'll honor it. Any credit industries that we have and all that, a lot of the American companies and European companies are very happy to buy products, especially when you're dealing with data and cybersecurity and physical security from a company that's coming out from Singapore, simply because the Singapore government has such a strong, trusted reputation all around the world. And just to touch on that a little bit, I may be a bit biased because I'm Singaporean, but I really do think that the Singapore government puts in a lot of effort to support companies going international from Singapore. And they have a lot of different policies that have been put in. But over the years, I really want to give credit to agencies like Enterprise Singapore, EDB, and so on and so forth. Where when we first started, we were looking at setting up our supply chain across Southeast Asia, from China, Vietnam, and all that. Enterprise Singapore actually gave us the support as well as the connections to set up our very first operating supply chain line out from China. And then when we were looking at internationalizing over to North America, and this was during the COVID period, right? We also have our own COVID moment stories. We had to. It was a do or die kind of system situation for the company, because many of our Southeast Asian markets were actually slowing down during the COVID period because of lockdowns and kind of a crisis in real estate. But whereas the US was open for business and our product was very fit for the US North American rental market, and so this was just around the vaccination time. We worked with Enterprise Singapore, and we said that we needed to set up an office over in the US to do business in the US. And they connected us up with quite a number of city councils all around the US. And Austin City Council was the one that responded very favorably and through a very warm introduction from the government of Singapore. And when we landed in Austin, Texas, we were greeted by a truckload of tacos, and then the rest is history. So we opened up our offices over there. During COVID, it was a one-way ticket to the US. This was before vaccinated travel in, and all this was facilitated. And because of that, today, 4 years later, we have a nice growing business over in the US and continue to scale. I don't think there's anywhere else in the world that the government is so vested and invested into the successes of its local enterprises, and we're just grateful for that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would second that. And now I understand what is your Austin connection, because I wondered why Austin, why not California, for instance. So now I understand. Okay, one other question I want to ask, and it's because it's a common thing with both of you that you have connections to universities. So Anthony, if I'm not mistaken, you teach at the National University of Singapore, and Jasmin, you were a student at NUS, right? You did your graduation there, and now you are you teaching at Berkeley? So what is the advantage as entrepreneurs to be, to have this academia kind of connection? Maybe Jasmin, if you could tell us.
Yeah, I definitely love when I talk about intentionality, I love the intellectual rigor that we need, right, as leaders to examine ourselves. And I love that interaction. And we have that in classes, in business school a lot, because they ask first principle questions that forces me to articulate, right, why I'm doing something, what I'm doing about it. And there's a whole bunch of reverse mentoring too, Bhagya, where they have all these cool things and they're telling me about all these new trends that I have no knowledge about. And I'm often so busy with my day-to-day work, I'm not looking around to see what the market's asking for, what the new trends are, what the young folks are thinking about, or the ways to cut, right? I thought I was innovative as a kid, right? I thought I used to ask those questions about why old people did things a certain way, things were a certain way. As I got older, somehow I asked those questions a lot less. And going back to school makes me ask those questions a lot, makes me confront the uncomfortable, right? Being questioned and always questioning the status quo. That's something that's important to keep in mind, and always to have that open mind so that we can keep growing. And that continuous learning is core in innovation.
And what about you, Anthony? You're a product of Stanford, and you keep your connections live with NUS as well. Mm-hmm. How does that help you?
Yeah, no, I love my students. So I think one of the things about running a business is that you are always bogged down with challenges, problems, questions, and sometimes the world might be like, hey, there's no point moving forward. But when you teach students and you mentor them, you're really open to a whole new mind of like ability to dream again, unencumbered by the realities of doing business. Like opportunities seems to be abound, and I think you can get curious with them again, with all sorts of different ideas that they can bring to the table. And like Yasmin said, many of them come with ideas that you don't even think about. I learned a lot about the beauty industry over in China for because a project that one of the teams created, and it was so fascinating for me. I didn't even realize that. Some of them are talking about pets. Some of them are talking. We have a group of students that are very deep into the military industry, and so that's something that I will never really look at unless I have students like this that come up with ideas and share that with me. So having this experience to break out from the day to day, right, to spend time with the new generation of entrepreneurs, or people trying to make a change in the world, is very refreshing. And I think like I said, like Jasmine said, right, I learn a lot from the students and learn a lot from the experience doing this.
Well, it's been great talking to both of you. And one of the things that at least I took away was that, being a Singaporean does bring things into this mix, into this, a big thing called entrepreneurship. And on that note, let's conclude this edition of Asian Insider. I'm Bhagyashree Garekar. This episode was produced and edited by Faiza Sunny. We hope you enjoyed this show, and if you did, do share it with your family and friends. And you can also sign up for our Asian Insider newsletter. I'm wishing everyone a very happy Year of the Horse. Thank you for joining us.